you choose a relationship that comes from the value of love or compassion or connection, if you choose a relationship that is central to that relationship is having conflict because you see that it is healthy, but doing it in a healthy way, right? So being all in as both parties to resolving your conflict. You could be like I am in my relationship, which is really important to me, that all ruptures are repaired, that we acknowledge that in a relationship there will be ruptures and to be okay with that, and to both jointly agree that when we have a rupture, we will do whatever we can to repair it.
Welcome to the 1000 Days Sober podcast. My name is Lee Davey. I am not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I live a self-led life, and I spend every single waking moment of that life helping other people do the same, like right now. Welcome to the pod, everybody. And for those of you who are watching via video, yes, I have a cracked tooth right in the middle. You know, I went to Latvia to have an implant done because in Latvia, it costs 2,000 euros. And in the UK, it costs 5,000 pounds. So I went to Latvia to have my implant done. And lo and behold, as he's pulling my tooth out, he cracks my crown, fixes it, tells me to take care of it. And then I break it a couple of days later. So I'm walking around with a big crack in my tooth, which is really interesting. Is like if I would have had this when I was like in my 20s, maybe even my early 30s, oh my God, I would be so worried about what people think about me. These days, I don't care. Although I do point it out to people because I can see them. I can see them looking at it and people get embarrassed. They don't know what to say. So yeah, there you go. Cracking my tooth, people. So today I am going to do a Q&A episode, if that's all right with you, my lovely people. I kind of like listening to them when I'm listening to other people's podcasts. So hopefully you'll get some value out of it as well. Okay, so I'm just going to answer two questions today. I don't want to make it too expansive, but it's not a question, but it is a question, but it's kind of like, well, I'll read it out. So this is from Sarah. They're both from Sarah, actually. And Sarah is one of our strivers. How do you put up a boundary, she says, as in the other person in a conflict wants to keep talking and wants to keep arguing. But I know, says Sarah, that it's a bad time. It's not a good time to keep arguing and things are not going to go well. So I try to say to the other person, hey, let's leave this. I just don't want to fight right now. And this annoys the other person even more. Okay. And the question is, what would you do about it? So here's what I think about this question, right? And I got to say from the outset that this has happened in every relationship that I've been in, right? So every relationship I've been in, when you get into conflict, sometimes one of the two people in that conflict is aware enough, has enough grounded energy within them to realize that their nervous system is in full-on sympathetic, so they're in full-on fight or flight, but they're able to catch the moment and say, hey, you know, I'm going to be a stand for this relationship here. This is too much for me, and this is just going to end in disaster. Please leave me alone and give me time to chill, okay? And I've been the person in a relationship who has said that, and I've had people violate that, what I call a physical boundary. So people violating that physical boundary, follow me around, wanting to argue some more. But I've also been the perpetrator, right? I've been the person who has been following the person who's told me we need a break into another room, shouting and screaming and saying we need to keep on having this fight. What's going on? I mean, what's going on in that moment is if you're the person who is not able to listen and hear that the other person needs a break and to be able to get above the line into self-energy to respect with compassion that request, then it's very likely that you're triggered. You are in sympathetic nervous system state. Parts of your ego have taken over control of your body, mind, and soul. And biology is just kicking in. And you are unable in that moment to do anything about it. So first thing I'll say is we have to have compassion. It's really difficult, but we have to have compassion with ourselves when we are the perpetrator. But we also have to try to find compassion with the perpetrator when it's not us, to just understand that in that moment they were triggered and their parts, their inner childlike parts, were doing what they could to keep them safe, which is when you're chasing someone around the room and not listening to them, it's a very dysfunctional way of keeping them safe. But as we all know as human beings, we all have a bit of that ourselves, right? So if we want people to forgive us when we are behaving dysfunctionally, we have to forgive other people. So just bear that in mind, okay? Also, I want to comment that in this relationship, let's say we got Sarah, but let's say we've also got Stephen, right? Her partner, let's say. And I'm making that up, right? So in that household, there's Sarah, okay? There is Stephen, but there's also the relationship. And Sarah will have values, Stephen will have values, but there also needs to be values that constitute the relationship. The relationship itself needs to be built from the foundation, strong foundation. So it needs to be like, there needs to be a conversation somewhere along the line, or a series of conversations between Sarah and Stephen that says, okay, what do we want our relationship to look like? What is the ideal relationship for me? What are the non-negotiables in this relationship? What are the things that I will not stand? Because that discussion is creating boundaries, right? And this is what this question is all about. How do you set a boundary? Well, that conversation and those series of conversations as you go through your relationship and your relationship grows and develops is a series of conversation, tweak, and polish, I guess, on how your relationship works and operates. But the key to that, it's like a house. The key to it is the foundations, because if the foundations are flimsy, the whole thing falls apart. So things like values, non-negotiables, rules and regulations around how you're going to behave within a relationship are really important. Because if you choose a relationship that comes from the value of love or compassion or connection, if you choose a relationship that is central to that relationship is having conflict because you see that it is healthy, but doing it in a healthy way, right? So being all in as both parties to resolving your conflict. You could be like I am in my relationship, which is really important to me, that all ruptures are repaired, that we acknowledge that in a relationship there will be ruptures and to be okay with that, and to both jointly agree that when we have a rupture, we will do whatever we can to repair it. And the one big one for me, which is a central theme of all the work that I do in my coaching practice, is I live a self-led life. So for me, in my relationship, I need to show up in self-energy as often as I can, and to recognize when my parts show up to lead and guide and take control of the relationship, and vice versa with my partner, right? So here are some examples of how you can have in this moment a discussion around the foundations of your relationship. And it feels like in Sarah's relationship, maybe these conversations have not been had, right? That they haven't had a conversation. And that happens, I think, only in healthy relationships, right? And what I mean by healthy is that one or two people are able to sit down, or two people are able to sit down and have a conversation about relationship from self-energy. A lot of us, myself included, were not taught to do that as a child, right? We actually witnessed our parents, our main source of information when it comes to how to have a relationship. We witnessed our parents actually behaving dysfunctionally. We witnessed our parents having no boundaries or very few boundaries or eroding the boundaries that they had. We recognized our parents having lots of ruptures, but never repairing them, right? So as I grew up in relationship, it never dawned on me to have a conversation with my partner on what a good, healthy relationship would look like, because I never saw my parents do that. I never saw my father, for example, ever apologize to my mother or vice versa. So it just didn't come into the equation, right? So the first thing to do in this instance is to really learn why you find it difficult to have that conversation. What are the challenges? What are the resistance? Why are your parts really reluctant to having that conversation with your partner. Self, when you're in self can have that conversation, but very often parts will prevent that from happening because they don't trust self to have the conversation, right? So a good example would be, let's say you're getting self energy and you sit down with your partner and you say, hey, I really want to talk about how we can have some really strong boundaries in our relationship and how we can better manage our conflict. And your partner says, I don't want to get involved in any of that crap, and starts having a go at you, then your parts will immediately come in to try to keep you safe. Maybe they'll say something like, oh, well, we can't have that conversation again. That is not going to work again. You know what I mean? So they're afraid of the outcome because of how you've experienced that outcome in the past. But don't give up, right? Like, it's really important. Now, I want to put a caveat in here and say that if you're with a partner that is physically abusive to you, I mean, that's very, very different, right? That's very different. So in this instance of you've realized, you've had a conversation and you've set the ground rules for what it means to have a healthy relationship. One of them is that when one or the other in the relationship turns around and says, enough, and you could have a code word for this if you want, enough, like, I do not want to talk about this anymore. I love you dearly. And right now, I'm going to be a stand for our relationship and say, I can't take it. This is too much. It's not going anywhere. I'd like to reconvene and have this finish this conversation another time when we are both in self-energy, or when I am in self-energy. Okay. That is key. All right. So let's say that has happened. And then all of a sudden, Stephen, in this case, is still following you around the room. What is really important is later on, when you can see that he is in self-energy and you are in self-energy. So like, the pause is really important here. Sometimes I've had a fight with my partner in the afternoon and I try to fix it in the evening because I'm feeling really uncomfortable, and it just ends up into another fight because I still have not released the energy that I'm holding within me, mainly anger. So a good practice is to, get outside, have a good scream, get in a car, have a good scream, release, do whatever you need to do to release that energy. Go shout at a tree in a park or something, but get rid of that energy. And then when you can see that your partner is more in a receiving state and you feel like you're in a receiving state, so you feel like he could listen, you can listen, and you sit down and say, hey, yesterday, when I told you that you would stop talking to me because I was overwhelmed, and this part is really important, right? Like, you're making an observation, you're saying something which is true in that moment, right? Like, if you played the video recorder back, you would see that that's exactly what was said. This is observation. And this is part of nonviolent communication, which I can touch upon in another video, okay? So yesterday, when I said to you, I need a break, my nervous system can't handle this, and I want to talk about it another time, you didn't listen to me, and you kept following me in the room, wanting to keep on talking. And I felt really uncomfortable. I felt really unsafe. I felt scared. I felt frustrated and angry. So you can put in there how you feel, right? And it's like, I need whatever your need is in that moment. So I need us to be connected. I need us to respect each other. I need us to listen to each other. And in this moment, I don't think that happened. And my request of you is that you take on board what I'm saying. And next time, you could try harder to listen to what I'm saying, right? So you're having that conversation using, in this case, nonviolent communication. So it's an improved communication technique. And then you're listening to what the other person's saying, and you take their feedback and you go from there. Now imagine you was the one who did that. Maybe you was the roles are reversed and you're the one chasing your partner in rooms. And the next day, when the argument has all disappeared, you're still out of integrity, right? Because actually what you did yesterday is you violated one of the rules in your relationship. So you need to be aware that what the rules are and that you did that, right? Then you go to your partner because you have a responsibility, a 100% responsibility for how you respond to all the other human beings on this planet, including your partner. Could be that your partner treated you horrifically, that they were shouting and screaming and throwing things and they started it all, right? As we say as kids, who started it? You started it. Could be that that happened, but that's irrelevant if we want to live a self-led life. Because if we want to live a self-led life, we want to live an inside-out life. We want to be the people who take control. And we can't control anybody else's behavior. We can't control if our partner, in this case, Stephen, is going to apologize, right, for his part. But what we can do is take responsibility ourselves. So in this instance, I would go to my partner and I would say, hey, yesterday, when you said to me, stop, my nervous system is shot. I can't continue right now. I'll have this conversation another time. I didn't listen to you. I disrespected you. And that is out of order. And I imagine it made you feel so unsafe, so angry, maybe even sad, rageful. And I'm so sorry. And I just want you to know that I've taken that on board. And in future, I'm going to try my very, very best to listen to you and to get the hell out. Right. So in that instance, what you're doing is you're putting it right. We're not asking for forgiveness. We're not seeking forgiveness for it. We're just putting it right. And then that becomes your modus operandi. Every time you have a fight, you don't go in asking the other person to apologize or asking the other person to own their shit. You're just going in and you're owning your shit. You're doing your part to keep the relationship solid. If you imagine a tennis court, you're on your side, he's on his side. You're just keeping your side clean. Okay. Also, whilst doing that, you are being a stand for the relationship. Now, very often in a relationship, in my experience, there's one person who generally takes the role of putting the relationship first. They become the bastion for that relationship. And usually there's somebody who puts being a parent first. So in my relationship, I would say that I am the bastion. I'm the person who will do the heavy lifting in my relationship with Liza. And Liza is the bastion and person who does the heavy lifting in parenting. Okay. So that's what happens. You take on these roles and we can't be resentful about it. It is what it is. You can have conversations about whether or not you're happy with your role and all that kind of stuff. But me and Liza seem to be operating okay with that. Okay. So just to summarize, because there's a lot there, right? If you are in a situation where you're trying to tell your partner to give you a break and they don't give you a break, you need to go back to basic relationship 101 and ask yourself, have we even had a conversation about the rules in our relationship? Like, have we even had that conversation? If you haven't, have it. If you have, use nonviolent communication or some other communication techniques to communicate that in that instance, those rules were not observed. Yeah. And then you also take 100% responsibility for the way you responded and you fix that rupture. And if you do this consistently, it is my experience, my personal experience of me applying this methodology. What tends to happen for me is Liza will say, I've had enough. I won't hear her because I don't have access to my executive function because biology is kicked in. I'm in fight or flight. So I won't hear her. I'll still continue. And she'll say, Lee. And it's something like that will jolt me. And she'll say, I've told you I need a break. And then in that moment, it's something like I wake up. It's because I'm used to this. And then I'll just leave. I could be so angry maybe, but I'll just leave. I'll get the hell out of the house. I'll get the hell out of the face. And I just need to blow that steam off and give her time and space. Yeah. But don't think that when you listen to this and you put this in play, it will work straight away. It may. But for me, in my experience, it doesn't work like that. But if you commit to repairing 100% of your ruptures, what I have found is your partner trusts you more and feels safer that if you do get into a conflict situation, in this case, when they do tell you to stop, you will get it a lot sooner than you have in the past. All right. So let me know if you've got any questions on that. You can WhatsApp me on +44 753 789 6829, or you can email me at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. Okay. All right. Second one, again from Sarah. My partner says I'm selfish and I only think about myself. And when this happens, I get so triggered and I say, that is not true. I think about you all the time. I am not selfish. And then my partner says, why can't you just listen to what I'm saying to you and apologize without coming back at me and defending yourself? And Sarah's saying, it really pisses me off when he does this, when he says I'm selfish, because he's talking in absolutes. And I do think about him a lot. Okay. So I want to just touch upon this. And I just want to say that these questions, these requests for advice, guidance, and support, these come from our Strive community. So Sarah is a member of that Strive community. And this gives you the option to ask questions of myself and other members of the group. And this is a group of people who want to live a self-led life, want to live more consciously. And Sarah's there trying to do that work, right? I'm helping her at the moment to become sober. She's 30 days clean. That's amazing. And we're helping her to get even more advanced on that. And one of the ways we're doing that is to help her to create really strong, solid boundaries within her relationship, because there's a link there between that and drinking alcohol, right? So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll show you the window in which to look into that arrangement. All right. So what do I want to say about this? Again, I want to say that this is one that really, I think a lot about myself. It happens a lot in relationships that I've been in the past and in present. I think, again, it's really important to recognize that human beings do tend to really play in the polarities of relationships, right? Especially when we're triggered and we're parts activated. So you'll hear things like, you never listen. You are so selfish all the time. You only ever think about yourself. You're always late. You never want to have sex. You're never horny. You always shout at the kids. It's this black and white, okay? And when we hear that and we get really triggered, it's usually linked to moments in your past when you was a child, when you heard the same thing probably thrown at you from either your parents or your teachers or whoever led and guided you and supervised you through sport and games and other clubs, right? Right. It doesn't come from nowhere. Like if someone said to you, you look like a stick of celery, you probably wouldn't get upset about it because no one's ever said that to you before. Like there's no history. There's no intrinsic emotional connection to that. Being called you're a stick of celery wasn't a traumatic moment for you. But someone saying you're so selfish, you never think about your sister, or you never think about your brother, or you're so naughty, or why don't you ever shut up? Those things that we hear when we're young, they are traumatic and they impact us in the body. And then as we grow up and as we get older, if we haven't dealt or healed that locked and blocked energy and released it, then it will still come up when through our senses, our five senses, we are triggered like we were when we were younger, right? It could be listening to the footsteps of a pair of heels that belonged to your wife, that sounded like your mum, all of a sudden triggers you, right? So there's that part of it. And working with a coach like myself or anybody else that I know and can recommend for you, or working with a therapist is vital. I think everybody should have a coach, coach or a therapist, whichever floats your boat, to be working on healing your past traumas so your nervous system is more regulated, so you're not triggered as often, so it allows you to take a pause and to feel what's going on in your body before shit comes out of your mouth that causes World War III, right? So if you want to be a better husband, a better wife, a better father, for example, you want to be less reactive, because I imagine the reactivity is part of the problem, then dealing with your nervous system is like really number one priority. Okay. So that is a key piece of work. The other thing that I would say in this instance is if somebody says you're selfish, and like I said, there's a polarity here, right? You're selfish all the time. Have an understanding that actually that's not how the world works, right? That's like really important. Like be self-aware and to understand that sometimes we are selfish and sometimes we think about other people. there is a biological benefit in being selfish, right? There is also a biological benefit in taking care of other people. So biologically, we are wired for both. And sometimes we take care of ourselves and sometimes we take care of other people, right? So it's really important to raise your awareness and understand that usually in life it's in the gray. Like I am sometimes sometimes I make the wrong choices as a parent. Sometimes I make excellent choices as a parent. Sometimes I am not the greatest husband. Sometimes I'm the greatest husband. Like I'm rarely, if ever, 100% of one role or another, right? Like I'm not a terrible brother. Sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. And it's really important to understand that that is life. Why? Because it allows you to have self-compassion with yourself when the inner critic is switched on. So you'll have a part of you or parts of your ego that were developed really young that criticize you when you do things wrong in one of your roles. So for me, I have a role of being a father, a husband, a son, a brother, a leader, a community builder, a marketer, a business owner, a producer, a writer, an interviewer. I have so many roles. And dependent on how we were raised and our history, sometimes we can have a really strong inner critic that criticize us because that part is not practiced in stepping into the vulnerability of accepting that we're not 100% perfect in anything. Again, programming and things to work through when we're younger, but just understanding that you play in the shades of gray, that you're on a spectrum, right? You're on a spectrum of selfishness, and sometimes you hit the 100% mark, and sometimes you're nowhere near it. Is really important because you can have that self-compassion and self-love for you. You can also then see that in other people, right? So if you have a partner you think is being selfish, rather than say to them, "Hey, you're always selfish," you can pull back a little bit and you can go, "Actually, that's not true. Sometimes they are selfish and sometimes they're not." All right. So this allows you to move away from generalizations, "You are selfish," and into an individual isolated incident using nonviolent communication. So like maybe there is only one chocolate left and she took the one chocolate. You could say, "Yesterday, when there was only one chocolate left and you took that one chocolate, I felt really angry and really frustrated. There was a part of me that called you selfish in that moment. You know, I needed a conversation to go on about who's going to have that last chocolate, you know, that type of thing, right?" So that's really important. You need to be able to look at somebody else and say, "Hey, hang on a minute. That person there is not 100% anything." Okay. They flick in and out, and then get curious and to ask, right? To ask the question, like, why, what is it about my behavior that you think is selfish? Right? Like you ask the question. Also, if you're being triggered, it's likely because there is a part of what the other person's saying and practicing and the way they are that you want to be and you're not, and you're beating yourself up about it. So in this case, maybe the person is completely selfless and you've never seen them selfish in their lives. And now they're calling you selfish and all of a sudden you're feeling really uncomfortable. That's probably because there's a part of you that really secretly wants to be like them and you don't think you are. Or there's a part of you that has shame or guilt or embarrassment or humiliation around the fact that you actually did used to be the way that they're saying. So in this case, selfishness. So maybe you have this belief that you did used to be selfish and you still are ashamed of that, or you still have guilt, embarrassment, humiliation of your behavior back then, and you haven't cleaned that up. Or you recognize or have this internal voice, this internal critic that tells you that you are selfish. right? So you have an internal voice that is actually saying to you the same as the external voice is communicating to you. You're telling yourself that you're selfish, but there's cognitive dissonance there. There's two contrasting opinions. You have a part that thinks you're selfish, but self knows that that isn't the case. Sometimes you're selfish, sometimes you're not. So there's a cognitive dissonance there. But in this instance, the part that that you have a part that acts in a selfish way sometimes, and then you have another part that criticizes that part for being selfish. They will get activated in that moment when someone says you're selfish. So a good question that I always ask myself is, where's the mirror here? What's the projection? Or if we consider that our life, the movie of our life, we've created the movie of our life, right? So we have scripted our life and the movie of our life, and we've scripted all the characters in that life. So the only people in our world are just characters that we've created. Then I always ask myself, why have I created this human being and programmed, scripted it to tell me I'm selfish? What have I got to learn? And in that, I may have to learn that I am a little bit more selfish and unselfish, and I need to take a look at it. It might be that I need to hear more people tell me, give me feedback that doesn't agree with the way I see it. And I have to listen to it. And I need to accept that their opinion of me is different than mine and not get defensive about it. So a huge piece of work, if you want to live a self-led life, is someone comes up and says you're selfish. If you get triggered in that moment, you will defend, right? And you'll start to give them examples where you're not selfish. Maybe you'll be sarcastic. Maybe you will be passive aggressive. Whatever it is, you want to win that argument. But the key would be, okay, this person thinks I'm selfish, but that doesn't mean that I am selfish because I know who I am. And being able to be like, okay, you think I'm selfish? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for giving me that feedback. What could I do to be less selfish in your eyes? Right? That is so powerful, but so difficult to get to because our nervous system will hijack it, right? Biology will kick in. If we haven't done the healing work of our past traumas, biology will kick in, or our societal conditioning. Our biology will kick in, we'll get triggered and we'll want to defend. Again, this is why the rupture and repair is really important. You can go back afterwards and say, hey, yesterday when you said I was selfish, I really defended myself and was really kind of like justifying why my behavior is okay. I'm not happy with that. So I want to ask you, do you really think I'm selfish? Yeah. When does that show up for you? What does it look like? And what could I do differently? Right? You can do that when your nervous system is settled and you're in what Stephen Porges in polyvagal theory says, social engagement system. You're open and available to have a really healthy, beautiful conversation with someone from a very relaxed state of being. Okay. If you have any questions on that, again, just WhatsApp me +44 753 789 6829. Don't ring me because I won't answer it. But you can text me and I'll communicate with you. Or you can email me at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. Okay. If you would like to ask me a question, those are the two forms of communication. Get them to me, and then next time I'll answer them here. Maybe I can give you a little bit of help. Just remember, these answers that I'm giving you all come from my own personal experience, my training as a life coach with the Elementum Coaching Institute, and areas in life where I've absolutely screwed up and continue to screw up. And I'm okay with that. And I'm working through it, right? So always seek alternative opinions and thoughts so you can take the best bits of everything. But I hope today there is something that you took away. And I'd really like you to tell me about it. So email me at the Strive Method or WhatsApp me. Say, Lee, thanks for the podcast. This is what I took away from it. I really appreciate that as well. I really appreciate that as well. And could you please, if you have the time, go rate, review the show or tell somebody else about it. That would be amazing. Lastly, if you do want to do this work yourself, that you want to know how to implement these practices to start living a self-led life, alcohol-free as fuck or otherwise, then you know how to get a hold of me. I do one-to-one coaching with people. And I also have Strive, which is a beautiful group community where you can do this work, get access to my Strive method, access to weekly group coaching, and to have a good conversation with people like Sarah and myself. Much love, everybody, and strive on. Take care. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Just a few thank yous. First of all, I want to thank you guys and girls for listening to this podcast and being supporters of it. Many people stop drinking alcohol just by listening to this podcast. I get a lot of people reaching out to me, thanking me for that, right? So give this to somebody as a gift today, or rate and review the podcast. If you can rate and review the podcast on your local podcast player and tell somebody about it, you could change somebody's life today, okay? So thank you for listening, and thank you in advance for that piece of service. Also want to thank our producer, Stan. Stan is still currently in the Ukraine, fighting the war and producing our podcast while his family is somewhere else in the world right now, okay, apart from him. So everybody send out your prayers and your love. Stan, we love you. Thank you very much for everything you do here. For you out there, if you are starting to think about, contemplate, reflect on your relationship with alcohol, you do not have to do this alone. Yes, you drink alone, but you don't have to stop alone, okay? And if alcohol is not your thing, but you are starting to feel that you actually are living a parts-led life, the ego is getting in the way too much, so you're not happy with the way life is going, then reach out to us at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. Just say, Lee, and just tell me what is on your mind, and we'll start to have that conversation. Strive community is a beautiful place where you can start to feel seen, heard, and matter. It's where you can get community, and it's where you can start practicing what we call the 8 C's of self, our core values, right? Of creativity, curiosity, connection, compassion, courage. I can't remember the rest of them, but there's 8 of them, right? And we have our quest structured. So we have assignments, and they're really interesting, exciting. At the end of them, we say to you, come on, do this quest, right? Get involved in this challenge. And strivers are really finding it exciting, and they're working their challenges in these areas that are going to increase the amount of time they spend in self-energy, in a state of flow. And that has amazing repercussions for the relationship you grow with yourself, and for how you reach out to others in their life, like how you parent, how you are as a child to your, not child, but a son or a daughter, how you are in the relationship with the person you share your bed with, and how you behave with your employees, right? So reach out to me at strivemethod@gmail.com if you want to learn more. Okay, much love, everybody.